All right, so I want to talk about AI today and some effects that I'm seeing. And one, I just want to bring attention to it because I'm not really seeing much opposition to AI. It's pretty much just something that's been forced on the general public, and it seems to be everywhere. And, you know, as an American taxpayer, our taxes are funding this whole AI push. And I feel like we're going to be witnessing a lot of fallout in society from it. And what I want to just bring attention to is AI's effect on the human imagination. And, it's interesting to think because you think of like the word imagination and you think of like a little kid, playing soldier or, playing bubbles or imagining, some fictitious world. But in fact, the human imagination is an extremely powerful tool, and the powers that be do not want people using their imagination. An individual who's in good health, good spirits, and is intelligent and uses their imagination can literally change the world. And there's been great people in the past that have done this, and they've used their imagination to imagine something that hasn't existed, and they brought it to fruition. And, each and every one of us have that ability. We're all born with the ability to imagine things, and we're all born with the ability to dream. And this is, like I said, extremely powerful. And what I'm observing with AI particularly is it's wanting to replace people's ability to use their imagination and to really even think in general. And what's going to happen if humans start relying on computers to imagine the world for them? What's going to happen is, so what's interesting about these AI models is that they're basically just they're retrieving data and they're bringing it back to you. I mean, the most common ones are language learning models that we interact with all the time. And you ask it a question, and then it paws through a ton of data and then brings you back an answer. And so what's interesting about that is these systems are designed by humans, and within these systems there's filters, and those filters they're like stop gates for information, and those parameters are set by humans. And so there's certain answers and information that you will never receive and you will never get. And that's the fundamental difference between humans' imagination and these AI machines and models that we're interacting with, is there's a ceiling and a limit. You can never go beyond that. And so it leads the question of, are the people setting these limits, are they nefarious in nature? And, we are seeing evidence where information that is being provided to people when they're asking questions is inherently dark. And there are people who are it's ending their lives based upon what these AI models are telling them. And a lot of this just isn't reported on. And the fallout from AI, and really the only pushback that I'm seeing is in the data centers, where what's happening is, I'm sure you're aware, they're building these things everywhere. And, they're huge consumers of power, they're huge consumers of water, and they cost a fortune. And they're funding all this, if you live in America, they're funding it with tax money. And what ends up happening is, they're consuming large amounts of resources, but they're also huge polluters. So in my state, in Oregon, we have a huge river at the north of the state. It's the Columbia River. It's massive. And there are several dams on that river. And it generates a ton of electricity. And the state of Oregon in general is a huge electricity producer. It's mostly hydro, but there's other forms of electricity generation, but mostly hydro. And so they've set up these huge data centers right in proximity to these dams. And so what's happening is is that the primary cooling for these. So the data centers they're just like racks and racks of GPUs, of like processors processing information and data, and there's just warehouses. There's giant warehouses that house these processors, and they generate heat. And so the primary method of cooling these is with water. And so what's happening specifically at this Boardman, it's called I think it's the Boardman facility, is so they're pumping water out of the ground, and through the cooling process, the water becomes concentrated, and then they're discharging this water, and it's leading to contamination of the groundwater. So there's chemicals in the ground already. There's salts and particulates and different concentration of things from like agriculture and other industry that's been there. And so they pump this water, and it gets concentrated, then they're discharging it, and then it's affecting the groundwater. So you could easily make the argument that that when you use AI, you're literally polluting the earth, and no one cares that it's destroying the earth. And with all the environmental movements, and humans are so bad, and we need to stop eating meat, and all these things that we need to do, but yet we're marching forward with this rapid development of AI. And it's interesting because we've been primed to accept AI, and the way that has been done is through this technique called predictive programming. And the way predictive programming works is ideas and concepts get integrated into fictional stories. And there's two that like stand out for sure. There's Minority Report, which is about AI predicting crime, and then the other one is AI. It's a Spielberg movie about AI robots and AI running the world, and so what ends up happening is these ideas get implanted into your subconscious and your psyche, and you're taking these in, and the information is being presented as a story, and what ends up happening is you become susceptible to these ideas integrating into your awareness through story and emotion. And so you're watching a story, and the main difference is imagine if you're sitting in like a college lecture hall and you're being presented information. You're reasoning that information with your own ideas and knowledge and beliefs. And so you can easily be suspect of something like, oh, this doesn't sound right. But if you're in a relaxed state and you're watching something fictional and there's a lot of emotion involved with it, you are wide open to being primed with these concepts. And what's really interesting is in the AI movie, the Spielberg movie, there's an AI god that people go to, and they ask this AI god, questions. And the fact that we've been primed with that, the likelihood of AI fulfilling the role of a higher presence in humans' lives, it's right around the corner. It probably already exists. I don't know. I mean, I really try to avoid interacting with AI as much as I can, because it doesn't make sense. That's the other thing about it is, yeah, there's all this stuff in the news like, oh, it's going to take our jobs. Data centers are going everywhere, and you're kind of like, okay, well, what does it really do? What's it for? Like, what's the utility? Is this really going to help us? Is this going to hurt us? And the big push is everyone trying to understand AI and really integrate it into their lives. And yes, it can be a helpful tool in certain situations, but the fact that it threatens a fundamental quality that's unique to humans, with the imagination, and even a connection to a higher presence, which in a way is your imagination, because religion and all these things it's all based on faith, which faith really, it's not tangible, it's all kind of in your imagination. And like I was saying, with the power of an individual to dream and imagine and think of something that's never been done before, that's a great threat to the powers that be. And AI is the answer to that. And that's really my point. And no one is really seeing this coming, because I think we're kind of being fed, more of a smokescreen with what the negative parts of AI are and what the positive things are. And it's really infiltrated even YouTube. So what's really interesting is when you think about YouTube, it's a content creator platform, and people are using their imaginations to dream up ideas and videos and content. And what am I gonna produce? What am I gonna make? So you're using your imagination to think of ideas, to think of a thumbnail, a picture, and like for me on this channel, it's all imagination. I have an idea, and then I imagine that idea, and then I think on it, and then I sit down and talk about it. And my imagination is the tool that I'm using. And since the human imagination is limitless, for example, in a context like this, where I'm speaking to you and sharing knowledge and ideas, I could say something that you've never heard, or maybe I've never heard, but I imagined it, and then I'm sharing it. And that limitless potential of that, you could say something that could spark a huge change in the world. And and you know how it goes. Like, it's like a spark that starts a fire, and then it just spreads rapidly. And in the YouTube creator platform, it's heavy AI. So even for video ideas, it's like, use AI and we will tell you the idea to talk about. And I'm not sure, I don't know any other creators. I mean, I've met a couple, but there's a few around where I live, but a lot of times it's hard to talk with creators unless you're like a huge channel and they're a huge channel and whatever. But it'd be interesting to know, are creators leaning on AI as their primary mode of imagining content? Because then you got to think, okay, they're using the AI to generate ideas, and there's those filters in there, and you're never going past any kind of idea that could be revolutionary or groundbreaking. And the same goes for the thumbnail generation. When you're making a picture for the thumbnail, everyone's leaning on AI to generate these images. And you can see, like, a lot of the channels that I like, it's this AI generated image. And rather than, thinking of your imagination and being creative and trying something new, and, not like my thumbnails are amazing. I mean, they're just like really simple and to the point, but someone could use their imagination and think of something new that would really spark a lot of interest, because that's what the goal is with this content creation. It's to share knowledge, ideas, and spark interest, and intrigue people and entertain them at the same time. And we're kind of in this lull right now in society where there's not there's not a lot of innovation happening. I mean, there is innovation in some regard. Like, obviously, when you think of people inventing things and innovating and having new ideas, it's kind of all tech right now, and AI, and maybe there's some medicine, but I feel like we've come so far, and we're standing on the shoulders of like great thinkers, like thinking Nikola Tesla. I mean, that guy was like all imagination, man. And there was no AI, and there was no computers. And he figured out how to beam electricity wirelessly. And his whole thing was free electricity for everybody. And that was before all of this. So we've come so far, and we've integrated this technology into our lives. And, it's going to make it so everyone is exactly the same. And you never have an expansive universe of thought, and you'll never have a new idea. And it's sad and disheartening to think about, the children growing up now to then becoming adults, and what the effects of, life will be for them. Because if we're not innovating and having new ideas, and everything is stagnant, and the way we're using our imagination is we're leaning on a machine, then we're just going to become robots. And there's more than meets the eye on all this. And I think a lot of it is shrouded in mystery, purposely, so we're not thinking of, wow, this could actually really change humans fundamentally forever. And there's a few companies to watch out for as far as where a lot of this is going, and it's really in the military industrial complex. And one company is called Palantir, and it's all behavior surveillance, using its behavior predictions and surveillance using AI models, and the data centers for like massive real-time computing. And so you can check them out and kind of see what they're up to. But yeah, they're really pushing the AI surveillance on people. And I've been seeing more things popping up. I don't know. I haven't seen anything around where I live, but they are in larger metropolitan areas. And a lot of this interaction we're having with the computers and the AI models, it's learning from us, and we're actively participating in human prediction learning and modeling, and we're doing this unknowingly. And I remember reading an article about how there's a database that is every American citizen's avatar, and everyone with a social security number has an avatar in this parallel world, and it exists in a computer simulation model. And every time we're interacting, and they're able to extract our information and our data, and a great example is like when you're typing and you're spelling a word, and then it spells the word for you, and then you agree to that word. Like I'm spelling the word ocean, and I go O-C, and then it's E-A-N, and it spells it for you, and then you're like, yeah, you just provided a metric for that avatar. And so they're able to predict humans' behavior, and then what they do is they run simulation models on everything in there. And this has been happening for a really long time. And as they run simulation models, they're able to predict people and their behaviors at an astonishing rate of accuracy. And even, like your smartphone, when you carry it with you, it's tracking where you go. That's more behavior predicting. It's, just talking about it, it's really scary to think. And at the forefront of this that we're paying for and we're actively participating in, it's AI. And so there are some weaknesses to AI, and there are some things that we can do, and maybe you thought of, maybe you haven't, but the biggest weakness with AI is the power consumption. And they're really trying to figure out how to solve that problem, because in order to scale AI and these systems and the computing and processing power, they need more and more and more power, to run these systems, because they can't grow without more power. And at the rate of development of the AI models, the power can't keep up. So, I'm sure I don't know if you heard about like the small modular nuclear reactors. They're pushing that. We're probably going to see that roll out. You're going to see data centers set up anywhere where it's cheap electricity. So, think of anything, potential where there's like volcanic activity, anywhere where there's like energy for cheap and it's abundant supply. So you can kind of predict where these things are going to go. And so the other thing that we can do, and I've been thinking a lot about this, and it could really turn the tables for what's happening economically for a lot of people. And when you think about every day we're interacting on these platforms with the computer, social media platforms, really everything. Well, anything that's technology related. So every time you are doing this, especially if you're interacting with these platforms that are using your data for everything, for advertising and behavior predicting and all that, you're generating data, and the data that you generate is unique to you. And so in a sense, you're like a little factory that has been generating data over time. And to these companies, that data is so valuable. And you think about, how a company like Facebook is valued. And, their primary mode of earning, I think their biggest profit is in advertising. And the key metric in advertising and why they're making so much money in advertising is your data. And you give this to them for free. And they take that and then they use it to market things to you. And then they charge people with products to market their product on their platform. And they're using this to predict your behavior and to observe you and analyze you and throw you a product that they think you will buy. And so you're giving up this extremely valuable component. So you're this factory that is cranking out gold, and you're literally just like flicking the coin. Hey man, here you go, boom, here's a gold coin. It literally is gold. I mean, I was trying to figure out the metric, and if you're into math, so I was looking at the metric on this, and it was like I was trying to equate the value of a minute, a second, a minute, an hour, a day spent on a platform like Instagram or Facebook. Well, I guess it's Meta because it's all one company. So think about equating, time that you spend on that platform, and then look how much they're earning annually in profit from advertising, and then you can generate a metric on how valuable, a second, a minute, an hour, a day, a year is of your time, of this information that you're providing to them. And then you'll see, like, holy cow, man, like, this is some serious money that I'm giving, that's on the table that they're getting for free. So really the answer is this: it's the general public saying, no, you don't get this for free, and if you want to do business with us, you pay a fee, and that's it right there. And can you imagine if you had just a passive clicker? Because we're already on the devices all the time anyway, and everyone's addicted to this. I talked about it in my dopamine video. But imagine what that would do for people financially if they were getting paid for their data that they're making. I mean, that could really turn the tide for a lot of people economically. That would be huge. So, I don't know if that'll happen, because someone's going to ask AI, like, how do I make money? And they're like, you shouldn't make money. You should just go jump off a bridge or something. And you're like, oh man, that's not what I was looking to hear. But it's some interesting points, and I've been really thinking about it, and I think it's important to observe. And I'm really trying to avoid interacting with AI as much as possible, because it's too mysterious, and there's something else going on behind the scenes. So, the best thing we can do is really just try to build ourselves up and get healthy and stay active and use our minds as much as possible. And, when you're in this state and you start, building your intelligence and you start learning and you understand and see things clearly and you start, really using your imagination to think and apply it to problems, then there's huge potential because, every one of us, we're like a wild card because the individual is the greatest threat to the system. That's the fact. And that's why, we live in this time where, it's just so much mimicry and people are afraid to be themselves and people don't know themselves. And that's why, in school and out in the world and society, it's really hard to get a sense of self and a sense of purpose, from who you really are. And that's by design. That's why we're faced with that. So, I want to build the opposition to artificial intelligence, which is organic intelligence. That's what I want to push. That's what I'm imagining. I mean, it's just humans' intelligence, but let's push something that's real, that's limitless, and that's organic intelligence. And that comes from you and it comes from me. And we can easily do this because we're born with the tools, man. All we got to do is get our head and our body and our spirit out of the gutter and we're good to go. So I hope this was encouraging, and take a look at the AI stuff and, peel back the curtain because, man, it's ugly. Anyway, I appreciate your time. Have a good day.